I remember way back when the mega powers were bonded.
Days when the rain and the sun are gone. Black as night. Agony's holding my heart tonight. So afraid, slipping and falling and
Mega powers, yeah.
Hello and welcome everybody. Thank you so much for stopping by the channel today. My name's Nigel and we're going to be talking about the recently released M3 MacBook Pro. Now, this is the first time that Apple has created a configuration that didn't have the Pro version within it. And what that did is allowed them to create a price point on the entry-level MacBook Pro that's $400 cheaper than the previous two iterations with the M1 Pro and the M2 Pro. Also, going to introduce a very interesting competition between another recently released Apple product, the 15-inch MacBook Air. The second configuration puts it right in line with the same price as this base model 14-inch MacBook Pro. I think that a lot of people that are considering purchasing a new MacBook today are really going to be looking at both of these, and they're going to have a difficult time choosing from one to the other. So we're going to go over all the details together, and by the end of this video, my goal is to have helped you and myself decide whether or not the 15-inch Air is the way to go, or if this new M3 MacBook Pro is the way to do it. Now, let's talk a little bit about what my first impressions were when I opened up the box for the first time. If any of you have purchased an Apple product in recent history, you'll know what this is like. Very minimalist, but at the same time, when you set your eyes on that new piece of hardware for the first time, you know you're about to create something special. I think that's part of that first impression. You know what you're about to get yourself into, and in most cases, you probably know you're never going to go back. As far as the feeling of this new 14-inch, it feels like the last 14-inch. Very nice. It feels a little chunky compared to this 15-inch Air that I've been using, but that's not to say that it's a heavy machine or clunky or bulky by any means. Overall, I don't think it's as comfortable of a product. I have to hold my legs closer together to keep it in my lap if I am using it that way. I don't have as much support for my hands and my wrists because that lower deck is just not as big. That one extra inch that you get with the 15 makes a big difference, not just in the screen size, but in the way that it feels if I'm using it on my lap, the way that it feels to have my hands resting on that lower palm rest area, the trackpad, everything about it is more comfortable. There's just no comparison. This is a great computer. Tons of you are going to purchase this and absolutely love it. But for me, portability and comfort, we already have 1 point for the MacBook Air. Now, something worth mentioning is just the general everyday performance of doing some of those more mundane tasks like searching the web, watching a YouTube video, work-related things, emails, documents, etc. Is there a difference in the speed at which you're capable of performing those tasks from the M2 to the M3? The sensation of speed between one to the other when performing these day-to-day tasks is going to feel about the same. Now, I know I'm kind of glossing over what it would be like to use this computer with some more resource-intensive programs. For instance, if you're editing 8K video or something like that in Final Cut Pro, or you're a graphic designer, a game designer, etc., etc. I realize the M3 is going to be a better performer at certain tasks, but I think for most of us, this M2 in the 15, and during these normal everyday tasks, I don't think you'll notice a difference. I haven't so far. And now everybody's favorite part of the video where I remind you to hit that thumbs up button for me. And if this is your second or third time visiting the channel, hey, why not hit the subscribe button? I want to hit 1,000 subs by the end of the year, which I know is probably a pretty unrealistic goal considering there's only a little over 400 of you now. Anything can happen, and with your support, I think we can get this done. So thumbs up, subscribe, tell your friends. Thanks so much for being here. On with the video. And now I'd like to talk a little bit about the differences in screen. I think that this is going to be one of the #1 considerations that most of you have when you're deciding between this 15-inch Air or this new 14-inch MacBook Pro. Right off the bat, you have an advantage with the 15-inch being that there's more screen real estate. But that, my friends, is the final advantage that goes to this 15-inch. Every other quality of life improvement that you could imagine resides solely in this 14-inch screen, the brightness it's capable of, the quality of the HDR that's on display here, the colors, the sharpness, everything about this screen is amazing. This is going to be a really important factor in those of you that have HDR as a part of your workflow. I don't have a camera that's capable of capturing 10-bit. There might be a time in the future where that does become an issue, but my M2 Pro equipped Mac Mini with this 42-inch OLED by LG, it's a C3, it's awesome, and sometimes it decides to start responding to me. Stop listening. Stop listening. Get the fuck out of here. Stop listening, you insanity. You guys, that was absolutely wild. I'm better now. Back to what I was trying to talk about. I need that additional screen real estate. It makes a big difference for me, and I think a lot of you out there will notice a big difference as well. But when it comes to sheer image quality, there's a clear victor here. It's the MacBook Pro. Moving on to sound quality. Holy smokes. How did they get a set of speakers in this 14 to sound as good as it does? You guys, last night I was sitting in my chair specifically doing my audio comparison sort of section. I sat there for a couple of hours demoing all sorts of different music back to back between both of these computers. Here's an example of where I think some of the biggest differences can be heard between the two. One of them would be with Atmos enabled tracks. The ability for this array of speakers to move sound around you physically. I said it in my last review. I just don't know how they're able to do that from a laptop with speakers in the orientation that they are. I'm sure the information is out there on how they do it. I don't even want to know. I love the magic of it. Even when listening to something in just regular left and right stereo, the separation in the frequencies allow those certain instruments to float in their own areas, whereas the 15-inch definitely does not share that characteristic. It just all sort of sounds blobbed in the middle. That's, of course, comparing them back to back. When you're just sitting here with this 15 on your lap and for whatever reason you're using the internal speakers, it sounds fine. It's just that these aren't just fine, they're extraordinary. And there you have it. An absolutely devastating and brutal victory for the 14-inch MacBook Pro. Now, many of you out there might be using this computer for your personal business, and making Zoom calls, conference calls, things like that would be part of your workflow, your day-to-day routine. And we need to know, is the camera any good? Is the mic quality any good? Apple has always tossed around language like studio quality mics, but what do they mean by that exactly? Because what I can tell you is that the studio quality mic that's built in to the last Pro doesn't sound nearly as good as this mic, which is a cheap studio mic. Now, obviously, it's not going to be as easy to take what exists in this large form factor and pack it into a pinhole on a laptop. I understand that. But when you start tossing around the language like studio quality, well, this is what I'm going to compare it to. Let's test these out. Let's see how they compare to, say, the quality of this camera or the quality of this microphone. Okay, now what you're hearing and seeing now is the footage captured from the 15-inch MacBook Air. This is the microphone, this is the camera, and this is what you can expect when recording or making a phone call, FaceTime, Zoom, whatever the case may be. This is what you're gonna look and sound like. Okay, and here we are with the M3 MacBook Pro 14-inch. This is the internal camera and audio you're hearing and seeing right now. Not sure if there's a difference between the two or not. Let's go ahead and export this, put it in our project, and see if there's a noticeable difference. Okay, now after reviewing the footage back to back, it's pretty clear that the 1080p FaceTime camera that both of these pieces of hardware share have the same image on them. Now, when it comes to these studio quality microphones, this is the only thing that I'm just gonna come flat out and say is suspect language, okay? These don't sound anything like even a reasonably priced studio quality microphone. So what are they comparing it to? I have no idea, but all I can say is, to me, doesn't sound good. It actually sounds pretty crappy. And I just really don't like the fact that they've labeled this as something anything other than what it is, which is a cheap built-in internal microphone. What does it all amount to at the end of the day? I know that there are those of you, including myself, that can get really hung up on specifications, numbers, all of those kind of things can give us an idea about something before we try the product out, for instance, or help us to figure out whether it's even worth our time. And once we move on to actually physically getting the product into our hands, trying it out for the first time, that's when it becomes, for me at least, a little bit more of an emotional experience. I hold this new MacBook and I start crying. I'm kidding. You know what I'm saying though. The feeling that you get from interacting with that device is ultimately what's going to determine whether or not you keep it. Okay, that is why I am choosing to continue using this amazing MacBook Air. There's something about the way that this computer feels to use that makes me want to keep going back to it. I don't have the desire to pick up that 14 in any way. I'm aware of the fact that the screen is much better, and I love it, by the way, but it's not enough to make me want to use a machine that doesn't feel good to interact with. Doesn't fit on my lap, my hands are cramped on it, I have to get closer to see it. All the brightness in the world's not going to fix that. The best HDR in the world won't fix that. All of the performance in the world won't fix that. There are certainly going to be those of you out there that will appreciate and love every moment of interacting with your 14-inch MacBook Pro that will fit perfectly on your lap and be the perfect everything for you. But for me, I'm sticking with the 15. I think that's a wrap. We've gone over all the things, and I think that hopefully we've all made our decisions up. I'm sticking with my 15. What are you going with? Are you going to go with the 14? Or maybe you're going with the 15 like me? I'd love to know where you landed. Drop a comment down below and let's talk about it. Aside from that, I want to thank each and every one of you for being here with me tonight. I appreciate it very much, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Have a wonderful night wherever you are.